All right, so welcome to another episode. And they got Brian Levy here and Brother Long here in Rwanda. And so we have talked about the daily scrum and the retrospective previously, and now we're going to switch to sprint planning. So the purpose of sprint planning is to plan what we're doing for the sprint. And the goal is you want to have the product owner be able to express, here's why we're doing this, right? So we were taking the product goal, decomposing it, and saying for this time box, for this sprint, here's why we're doing it. Here's the goal that we're trying to accomplish. And then once we have that goal established and we agree to it, the team is looking at, well, what do we need to do to accomplish that goal? So what are the items from the backlog that we can do within our capacity to accomplish all that? And then after you figure out what we're doing, you want to have a little bit of discussion on how we're going to do it. So who's doing what? And let's break this down. Let's break down the work that we're going to do into smaller pieces. So decomposition again, so that it'll be easier to see progress. We want to actually break things down such that we finish the items and we can see progress every one, possibly even 2 days. And that way, if there are problems, they're easier to surface. So again, the purpose of sprint planning, we want to figure out what we're doing for this sprint. How are we going to coordinate our activities to get us closer to that product goal by accomplishing our time box sprint goal? So that's what we're actually trying to accomplish. But what do you think about our sprint planning?
Well, so it sounds like we're doing some decomposing in this, or is the Scrum Master decomposing before this? Because now I'm thinking about what we were going for in our qualitative analysis,
Mm-hmm.
and so when we talk about taking our sprint goal, I mean taking our product goal, I mean we're
Yeah.
taking our goal yeah, we're taking our product goal and we're decomposing it and breaking it down, and we're deciding the work that we're going to do. Where does all of the things that we have been studying for our qualitative analysis fit into this? As in, does someone do all of that qualitative analysis before the sprint planning and present it at the sprint planning, or is that done during the sprint planning?
Excellent question. But you want to have the two main roles actually do a lot of preparation before sprint planning. And when I say the two major roles, I'm speaking specifically for the product owner and for the scrum master. So really what I like to have is the product owner starting off with looking at the product goal, looking at the backlog, and really thinking about what's the most important thing. Because again, keep in mind our focus is on gaining information. So what is the most important piece of information that we don't have now that we'd like to have for the future, right? So we want the product owner coming into the session with that thought process in mind, right? So if the product owner has been thinking about it, they've actually already done some research. They've thought about, hey, here's the thing I don't know, right? So they come in looking at the product backlog with a customer hypothesis, right? They believe that if we do, now, given certain assumptions that we have about the customer, if we focus our attention on doing certain activities, then we'll get some specific results. And so they're going to come in with that information. At the same time, you want your scrum master to have done some research ahead of time, and you want them to have thought about the product hypothesis. I mean, the productivity hypothesis. You want them have to come in thinking about what are the things that we could do, and if we actually did them correctly, would actually give us greater productivity. It would make us more effective as far as producing the work, right? And so we're going to have both of these things, both the customer hypothesis driven by the product owner and the productivity hypothesis driven by the scrum master, both thought about before sprint planning happens and both be inputs to sprint planning. Now, again, you can discuss either one of them first. Um, Normally, I like to have the product owner kind of lead sprint planning, setting the stage. Hey, here's our product goal. Here's what we're trying to accomplish overall. Being honest. Hey, we think that customers will like this thing, but it has a great degree of risk. We don't know. So we want to test this out. So the product owner should come in thinking about here are the things we're going to validate about what we believe to be true about our customers to reach our business objectives. And they should come in thinking about, well, here's how we're going to test it out, right? I'm going to build this stuff, but then also in the sprint, I want to actually invite this many customers to get their feedback on it. And if we get this many people giving their feedback to say, yes, we like it this way, then I'll know that my hypothesis was correct. And that way they can, they come in with that. And a lot of their work during the sprint is going to be contacting those customers or potential customers and getting them to attend the sprint review, which will happen at the end of the sprint. And that's where we'll get our feedback from them. Right. So they come in with that number and they should already come in knowing here's who we'd like to get information from to confirm my hypothesis. What do we think about this? Does this make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's all tying together. Everything every day is another piece of the puzzle that's making it all crystal clear.
And so again, after we figure out here's the stuff that because again, the developers on the team, they're the ones doing the work. And so they're the only ones really qualified and the only ones who really know if we can actually do all the work necessary to test out the customer hypothesis. So we need them to weigh in to see is this even feasible? If we can actually do it. So they look at the product backlog, they determine, hey, we can pull this stuff into our sprint and it's within our capacity, then great, right? We can keep the sprint goal. It could turn out that the things that we need to do to build whatever we need to build to show it and demonstrate it to customers is too much to do within one sprint. So we may have to go through and change our sprint goal. Again, the product owner comes with a proposal, but if you can't actually implement it because of your capacity, you may have to narrow it down. You may have to decompose it into a smaller piece. And that way we can actually make progress. And we can set expectations about when the product owner will get this information. It may take 2 sprints, right? And then once we figure out here are the things that we are doing, we solidify the sprint goal. Then we can actually say, all right, Scrum Master, let's talk about the productivity hypothesis. What did we decide from the retrospective that we were going to input in here to make things better and to improve our productivity? And let's make sure that we have enough capacity to be able to put those things in, right? And it may be that the item that we're going to actually implement to improve productivity is a big item. Not again, every sprint, you wanna do something. You wanna run some sort of process improvement experiment. But if the thing that you wanted to do is a big item, we may have to postpone it and do something else. Or we may even decide, hey, this is so important for our effectiveness that maybe some of the items we were going to do in order to accomplish the customer hypothesis, maybe one of those things we actually kick out of scope and we don't do that yet. So we can actually work on this productivity hypothesis. So the team they need to negotiate these things. So there'll be some discussion, some back and forth in order to coordinate what makes the most sense for us to do. But again, I want to try to accomplish some of both, some of the customer hypothesis and the productivity hypothesis inside of sprint planning. What are your thoughts?
That there's this overarching key here that is I think it's very important. You said that we're coming in and we're looking at the piece of information that we don't have and that we're trying to get.
Hmm.
That's kind of like the lemon on the salad. It changes everything a little bit. It seems minor, but it kind of changes everything because before my mind was just thinking that everything we're doing is to try to accomplish the sprint goal and develop the increment. But now I'm thinking that everything we're doing is to try to answer a question as to what info don't we have. And then the sprint and the increment will allow us to answer that question and acquire that new information. That's a subtle thing that I think is pretty major.
Yeah.
And so if we could, I would like to do a little exercise where we just simulate the process of maybe the peanut butter or the weight loss with the idea of what information or some other example you might can think of where we can really highlight that overarching mentality as in is it these are our assumptions, these are our beliefs, and this is what maybe the information is something that will verify or invalidate that assumption or belief or however that works.
Yeah. And I can use something that I honestly use in real life for this. And so let's stick with the weight loss, right?
Okay.
And so when I was trying to lose weight, the advice I got two different pieces of advice. One of the pieces of advice was, hey, just exercise. Doesn't matter what exercise you do, just go ahead and exercise, and that'll help you lose weight. Um, then I heard some people say, hey, if you really want to actually lose weight, what you should do is do weightlifting. And the reason is that if you do lifting, you build muscle. More muscle burns more calories, and that'll help you lose weight more and faster. Um, and so I tried it, right? I said, hey, you know what? Let's run an experiment. I heard that lifting weights will actually do it faster. So let's try an experiment and see if we actually do weightlifting. Again, doctors say that you can reasonably lose up to 2 pounds per week. Um, Safely lose it and keep it off. So I'm like, hey, let's wanna run a sprint with the assumption that if we change the way we exercise and do weightlifting, so this is focusing on a productivity hypothesis, right? That by doing weightlifting, I could actually lose a pound a week. So I wanted to test it out. So I went ahead and measured myself baseline to see what weight I was at before the experiment. So that way, at the end of the sprint, I could actually weigh myself and figure out where I was going to be at. And I brainstormed and I already had items pre-planned in the backlog, like how much weightlifting was going to do. So basically, what I decided to do is I'm like, hey, I'm going to go full force and lose the weight. So I had a card in the backlog for every day of the week, and I was just alternating body parts. So I would do a day for upper body, a day for lower body, and I switch back and forth. But on the third day, I would actually throw in ab work in my core. So upper body, lower body, core, upper body, lower body, core, right? In that rotation. So I had a card for each day of the sprint to do that. Right. And people say you should have a rest day. And I was just kind of like, you know what? I'll rest when I'm dead, or you know, or kind of had the mentality of because you often you get injured and things like that, or life gets you, and so you don't have time to work out the way you want to, and so I planned for 7 days a week, knowing that I was gonna have an emergency come up, and that one day I wouldn't be able to go out, and so I planned my experiment, right? And then I so in sprint planning, I had all that there. And again, I made it a family thing. So I told my family, like, here's what I'm doing. I need to be able to keep my diet the same. So make sure that you're not buying junk food. Don't offer, if you do, don't do it around me. Don't offer me any. Make sure I don't mess up my experiment by going off my diet. I have to eat the same diet I ate before. And that way it's a fair experiment. So I included my family in on it, right? They agreed to it, bought into the idea. At the same time, I have one of those Dexcoms. That's a blood continuous glucose monitor, so I can see my sugar levels and everything. Um, so I monitored that as I was going through, and I determined I was going to not only weigh myself, so I was going to weigh myself for weight, look at my body fat percentage, and I baseline those before I started, and then also looked at my glucose levels, and then I was gonna look at those after. So I had fully planned out the experiment, right? And I wanted to see that my body fat percentage either stayed the same or got reduced, and that I lost 1 pound, and my glucose level was either the same or lower. So those were like my parameters, and know that weightlifting would actually be effective. And then I went ahead and executed the sprint. I did it, and I found out that weightlifting was better. It was better than running for me. And so I actually, for a long time, in order to lose the weight, I really focused on weightlifting as a way to do it. So hopefully this makes sense. I ran an experiment, right? And I had to admit I didn't know the best way. I got advice from different places, but I didn't know the best way to actually do it. So you had to test something out, and that's what Scrum is all about, right? If you think you know everything, then Scrum isn't. No, Scrum will still work, but I can plan everything out if I know everything in advance, and I'm able to plan it out in a way that is more efficient than trying this iterative approach. But most of the problems that we face right now, we really don't know what the answer is. We don't know the best solution. We don't know exactly what our customers want. And so you have to actually experiment a little bit. And that's what I did. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Um, and that's something that could be easy to lose sight of. That we're doing this to try to figure out what information is it that we don't know, and that information, once we find it out, will get us closer to our goal.
kind of what you know, to actually write this out in my productivity hypothesis, just so you're aware, given that doctors recommend 3 days per week of exercise for 30 minutes. Whoops. And nutritionists argue that weightlifting is the most effective avenue for weight loss if I exercise at least 6 days per week, weightlifting for 30 minutes or more. I'm going to put in parentheses, i.e., an hour. I try to do at least 60 minutes. Then I should lose 1 pound per week. And my blood glucose level should remain the same or decrease. And my body fat percentage should remain the same or decrease. Right, so this was my actual hypothesis going into it. That I
Can you
actually
just say a bit about the? Can you just say a bit about the glucose and why you felt that way?
so the when you exercise, when you build more muscle, the theory is that the muscles, they soak up more glucose, more sugar from your bloodstream. It requires more energy to actually work muscles than fat, basically. And so as you're building muscle, your muscles grow. But even after you stop working out, the strain that you put on your muscles from working out will actually require more sugar, soak more out your bloodstream in order to repair itself. Because when you build muscle, you basically tear it up and your muscles have to rebuild. And that's how you get muscle growth. And so that was my hypothesis. And I'm going to make sure. And there's also a danger. The danger is that a lot of people, when they work out, they do strenuous exercise, they get hungrier. So you're trying to lose weight, and this happens with me with running. When I run, I get so hungry, I end up um I end up eating more. And so sometimes I don't lose weight. And sometimes I'll even gain weight. And there's lots of people I know that they're avid joggers and they're portly. They jog every day, but they're not skinny. They don't lose weight because it makes them hungry and they eat more. And so I'm on to be on the lookout for that to make sure that wasn't happening. And that's why I was monitoring the glucose level.
Okay. Now, would you enter this hypothesis somewhere into JIRA?
Yeah. So what I did was people have a sprint goal And in my opinion, most people do this incorrectly. In Jira, there's a sprint goal, and you can put whatever goal you want in there. And most people think that their goal is to build the product. But again, in Scrum, your goal should be to get information. So I make my hypothesis, I make it the sprint goal. And I put it in Jira in the slot for sprint goals. And when you actually add it in Jira, the sprint goal becomes the top item in the backlog. So you'll see the sprint goal, and then you'll see all of your sprint backlog items underneath. So this is and if you take the true heart of Scrum, that you're trying to gain information, you're trying to learn, and it's a continuous learning environment, then basically your hypothesis becomes the decomposed goal for your sprint time box. And I'm gonna show you how this plays out. So in the first sprint, I was looking at this hypothesis, and then I did find out that doing the weightlifting did help me out. So it was a better avenue than running, a better avenue than walking. But then I was trying to make it even more efficient because I found out that, for the first week or so, first couple of sprints, I was losing a pound, but then I wasn't losing a pound anymore. Right? I was losing less than a pound. And I was like, man, because I've lost like 40 pounds. Actually, I lost 50 pounds. And I was on the pace of a pound a week. And when I stopped losing the weight at that pace, I was like, look, it's gonna take me a long time. If I'm only losing like a quarter of a pound, it'll take me 4 years to lose all the weight I want to lose, right? And I didn't want that, so I had to figure out how to maximize it. So then it became a question of, well, experts say that if you're trying to build more muscle, you should actually lift heavier weights versus doing lighter weights and doing more repetitions. So I tested that out, right? And I'm glad I tested it because I don't know if my body just weird or not, but for me, lifting lighter weights with more repetitions actually built bigger muscles and helped me to lose weight faster, which was against the conventional wisdom. But I had to test it out, right? If I had not tested it out, I would never have known. And that's the beauty of these hypotheses. You use real data to form your conclusions. If you don't really test them out and use real data, lots of times you come to the wrong conclusions, so you do the wrong actions. And again, I'm living proof. I actually, I literally lost 50 pounds, and it's worked. And I've been able to keep it off. Well, for the most part. I mean, I gained 2 pounds, so I started out at about 220, and I weigh about 173 now. So I fluctuate between 170 and 173, depending upon how good the cooking is at home for me. Does this help a little bit?
Yes, this helps a lot. These deep dives are excellent, man. Wow.
And again, you got to test it out. I'm gonna go even further. The After I lost the weight, I got down to about 170, and then I just plateaued. I couldn't lose any more weight. I didn't really want to, but I plateaued and I couldn't anyway, using the same methods. And then I switched goals, and I'm like, all right, now I'm trying to lose more body fat percentage. I want to get healthier. And what I found is that just doing that weightlifting, I had like plateaued. I couldn't lose anymore. It wasn't being as effective. And then I found out that, I basically switched. I experimented with running because I actually started gaining weight. So I went down to 170 and then I plateaued and I started gaining weight and I got to 180. And I was like, oh, this is the wrong direction. And so I found that I had to switch and I switched to running. So now I run at least 5 miles, about at least 5 miles a day, and I get about 20,000 steps in. So I end up doing 10 miles between walking and running every day.
I thought you were just walking now. You still running?
I'm running also, right? Now again, I'm an old man, so it's a slow run. I'm only running like 5 miles per hour or something, 6 on a good day. Because it's something else I had to experiment with. I started trying to do a faster pace, running like I was a young man, like I used to be. And what I found out is that every time I ran harder at that faster pace, if I went um, above 6 miles per hour, I just got injured. I would pull a muscle or something like that, and then I ended up gaining weight because I couldn't work out for a while. I had to wait for myself to heal. And so what I found out is that I can get the exercise in. I was getting in shape by doing between 5 and 6 miles per hour. And it's like, hey, just take it easy. If you try to go above that, you're just gonna get injured. And that'll make things worse. So again, it's it was constant experimentation, right? I had a different hypothesis I was actually testing out, and I just kept rotating my tests each sprint. And I'm still doing it, right? I'm still doing it.
So when the product owner is developing the product backlog, should each item in the product backlog answer some question?
So I do two things. Most people just put work in the product backlog. I
Mhm.
have different types of stuff in the backlog. I have
Okay.
questions in the form of hypotheses in my backlog, questions that I want answered, and I have the work that I think is necessary to answer those questions as a subset.
Okay. Now, okay.
So my backlog is actually staggered, right? What you'll see in here is, and I'm going to draw this on the screen. I'll have a hypothesis, and then what I have underneath the hypothesis is the user stories necessary to actually test it out, right? And I have this throughout my backlog.
So now when you're doing this in Jira, you're creating user stories and then attaching them to the thing or in your one product, because in Jira you can create user stories, epics, yada 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 yada, tasks. So are you in your backlog, is this 3 boxes in Jira or is this one box with 3 things in it?
It's 3 boxes in Jira.
Okay.
And often what I'll do, so I may have a what I call a big question, a big hypothesis. And if I know it's going to take more than one sprint to figure out, which I can do from feel from doing this in a while, I'll make that item an epic. So I'll have an epic, and then within the epic, I may have several user stories. And the user stories may be in the form of a hypothesis and maybe in the form of just a product backlog work item, right? So I'll have all those attached to a parent epic. And the activity of backlog refinement, I break those things down.
Okay. Yeah, this is starting to make a lot more sense.
And I am very committed to making sure that everything is organized, that we have story points attached to each, that I know my capacity so that I don't overload myself. Because I know I have a problem with overloading myself. And if I overload myself, you know, I'm committed to getting stuff done. I'll stay up all night, work all weekend to make sure gets complete. And it's just, and what I found is that that hard working mentality, what it does is it kept me from my systems from actually burning the sugar, hence the continuous glucose monitor. And I would actually gain weight from actually overloading myself with too much work. So I actually needed more of a balance in order for my systems to work. I needed sleep. I couldn't, I came from a family of hardworking, military people where you die rather than fail the mission. So I grew up with that mentality. But what I found out is that um, if I'm not getting enough sleep, my body doesn't process the food correctly, and I'll end up gaining weight. So it ends up being counterproductive. So I have to balance life to make sure I get enough sleep and everything. And again, other experiments I found that out.
Okay.
And again, it's just a learning process. Like Scrum is meant for you to continuously learn. By using Scrum in my personal life, writing down my hypotheses, really executing this thing, I learned so much about myself, my body, and how it works. Right? Like I learned that if I don't work out in the morning, so before we started this podcast, you and I were talking, and you saw me walking around the neighborhood. If I don't work out in the morning, then something inside of me gets hungrier, so I eat more, and I have a greater tendency to go off my diet. So I have to work out in the morning to curb my appetite for the rest of the day. Otherwise, I'll throw everything off. Additionally, I've learned that not only do I have to eat in the morning, but I can't eat anything sweet. If I eat anything sweet in the morning, anything sugary, then I'll crave sugar for the entire day. Um, so I figured out that I need to eat protein in the morning. Now I can have some vegetables with it, but I need a mix of some protein, or when I'm working, I'll mindlessly just grab some snacks and it'll mess up my diet for the rest of the day. So again, just constantly experimenting to make these tweaks to make sure that I maintain healthy balance, healthy nutrition, things of that sort. And Scrum works with it, right? What do you think about my super deep dive?
I think that this is very good for me as I'm trying to navigate how to set up the Jira and what to create as the product owner, as a Scrum Master. It's becoming clearer to me um, how to actually make these things work. We're coming from the 10,000 foot view, and we're coming down to the bridge, and it's just exciting to me, man, because it is making me feel like I can do it. Every session we have, um, the vagueness goes away, and the concrete applicable steps of how to actually do all this just become more and more and more and more apparent, man. And so I'm so glad we started doing these podcasts, because these are going to put these tools in the hands of the people in a way that they can use them and actually um, utilize Scrum to a very high level in their personal lives, which will then give them the experience to have the confidence in interviews when they're professionalized when they go to get those scrum jobs. So I can just see how all this stuff is coming together full circle, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you say is so important, using this in your personal life, it gives you so much more grasp of the content of how all this stuff works, and so much more experience of the different dangers you can encounter and how to overcome them. So it's essential that you do this in your personal life to make it really work. All right, any last minute comments before we wrap up for today's podcast?
This is amazing. I'm glad we decided to go into these deep dives of the 353, man. This is just so cool. Thank you so much.
Oh, no worries. All right. Well, we'll catch you tomorrow for another episode, and we'll go from there.